60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. It is a dark day. If you're an Ohio State fan, earlier today we learned that the game has been canceled. Michigan not going to be able to field a team this week, and that leaves Ohio State in the lurch. Ohio State sitting with 5 games played this year, needs 6 under current Big Ten rules to be eligible for the Big Ten championship game next week. There is some movement in the Big Ten in terms of some teams that may not be able to move forward. That could open some games up. But let's go to a hypothetical. What if the Big Ten decided to play a little ball and allowed Ohio State to look out of conference? I know a great game out there. Texas A&M is looking for an opponent. I mean, I don't know how actively they're looking. We'll find that out here in a second, but their game with Ole Miss got canceled. You're looking at the number 4 and number 5 teams in college football playoff. I'm all for it. You know, let's talk to somebody on the A&M side of things. We go down to the state of Texas, state I used to live in for about 5 years, and we go to AggieYell.com, our sister site in the network, and talk to Mark Passwaters. And Mark, first and foremost, welcome to the BIA podcast.
Thank you. I am very humbled that you would have me on such a grand podcast. I am very, very fortunate to be with you.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. It's certainly a weird day here in Columbus, and you know, let's get right to it. I mean, I'm gonna preface this by saying the Big Ten already shot Nebraska down earlier this year when Nebraska tried to go out of conference and find an opponent, but that was week 2, not week 8 of the schedule. And we're dealing with a couple of teams with some very different situations right now. We're dealing with Ohio State, a team that really doesn't have much of a resume in terms of games played, has a top 10 win against Indiana. And then we have Texas A&M on the other side, playing in the SEC, strongest conference in the nation, certainly this year by far, who has a great win against Florida, a meh game against Vanderbilt early in the season, and and then everybody wants to circle that Alabama game. What do you think the interest around College Station, the state of Texas, and really across the nation would be if in this hypothetical we could get Ohio State and A&M to play a game somewhere, somehow, someplace?
Oh, I think that you already know the answer to that. It would be off the charts. I mean, this would be what college football is supposed to be, where the best teams play one another, given any opportunity. And here you're sitting with 2 teams that have put together, pretty respectable resumes, but are missing a piece. And this would be, the ultimate opportunity to kind of, put the piece in the puzzle that's missing in there. For A&M, they need that one more game to get to 10 total. And you take a look at what their schedule became, it wasn't what it was supposed to be honest. I mean, A&M knew that they were going to have a tough start with Alabama and Florida, and that proved to be the case. But then you were looking at going to Tennessee, and that was, on paper supposed to be tough. Now it's absolutely not. Tennessee's a 2-win team. Mississippi State was supposed to be better than they are. Ole Miss, A&M hasn't been able to play and probably won't. And then you take a look at some of the other programs. Auburn was a disappointment for many. It's just there's that one thing that A&M needs to really push themselves into the Final Four. And, obviously playing the team that is directly ahead of them would be a tremendous boost for them. And I think Ohio State not only needs the game in terms of getting to 6 and then playing for the conference championship, I think it would also eliminate any doubters that they have.
Exactly. I agree with you on all fronts. When you sit there and certainly looking at this from an Ohio State side of things, Michigan, they're not going to get to play them. Not a very good team this year. Penn State, they did get to play. Not a very good team this year. Nebraska, they did get to play them. Not a very good team this year. Honestly, it's just one of those strange years where Indiana was far and away the best win that Ohio State had, the best team on the schedule. And if Ohio State doesn't get to 6 games and the conference doesn't make some sort of change, Indiana would go to Indianapolis to play for the Big Ten title instead of Ohio State. Now, we're not the only people out there that have thought about the potential of what an Ohio State and A&M game would look like. Certainly been a lot of people on social media who have been pounding the table for this. I'm sure it'll fall on deaf ears in terms of Kevin Warren on the Big Ten front office side of things. How receptive do you think, and I really put you on the spot. This podcast came together in about the span of 45 minutes, if we're being completely honest. So we haven't had a chance to talk to any of our sources really or whatnot, but how receptive do you think that Jimbo Fisher and the athletic department and everybody would be on this if we move this game out of the hypothetical column and try to put it into a how would they make this happen type of situation?
Well, I think that Jimbo Fisher and A.D. Ross Bjork would be all for it. I don't think the SEC itself would go for it. Unfortunately, A&M has been actively trying to get the conference to switch some games around so they can get that 10th game, and basically they've said no. And one of the games that they're refusing to move or change is Tennessee's playing Vanderbilt this weekend. Oh, great. You have a 2-7 team against an 0-8 team. But that's more important than getting the number 5 team in the CFP poll another opportunity on the field. So, maybe this is still a little bit of A&M being the new kid on the block in the SEC, but I don't see much give there on the part of Greg Sankey and the SEC, and that's a tremendous disappointment. I would love for them to be able to go out, find an opponent, be it in the conference or outside, and play this weekend because, one thing that's being overlooked here from A&M's perspective is this was supposed to be senior day. This was going to be the last time these kids are going to play on Kyle Field. Obviously, if you play Ohio State, you're not going to play that game at A&M, but you're going to get an awful lot of attention. It'll be a nationally televised game for sure. And, hey, maybe that would be a respectable substitute for these kids who have put in so much time and effort just to see, a tremendous opportunity slip away here.
Exactly. And this was supposed to be Ohio State's senior day as well, too. And there's talk around the Big Ten that with Purdue having some COVID issues at the moment, that maybe they're unable to go, which could create a rematch against Indiana. And Ohio State already played Indiana in Columbus, and maybe a game in Bloomington, but that's for another show, another time. We're here on the BIA podcast talking with Mark Passwaters of AggieL.com, our sister site in the Rivals.com network, about a hypothetical Ohio State Texas A&M game. And, I want to go back to last week to BYU and Coastal Carolina. And that game came together in about 48 hours. And we all followed on social media how the BYU equipment truck loaded up and just went, and probably broke several DOT rules on the way out to Conway, South Carolina. And they made it, and it was a tremendous game, and it came down to a final play. And I only regret that I didn't get to watch much of it because I was on my way back from East Lansing watching Ohio State's 52-12 win over Michigan State. But you look at the excitement and everything that was around that BYU Coastal game. Two teams that are BYU independent, Coastal in the Sun Belt. Now you're talking about a team out of the SEC and a team out of the Big Ten. And that might be the downfall right there because they're out of two of the major conferences. And you talked about Greg Sankey on the SEC side, and I can talk about Kevin Warren on the Big Ten side, and there not being a lot of leeway, we'll put it that way, in terms of any of that to make these kinds of moves. But if you see the excitement that happened around BYU Coastal, I mean, multiply it by what? 10,000, 100,000, a million times if these two teams got to play. I mean, I'm trying to think about the last time they played. I think it was in the Sugar Bowl, to be quite honest, probably back in the 90s. I don't know if I remember a time them playing since.
No, that was it. The Sugar Bowl in 1999, or actually New Year's Eve 1998 was the last time the two teams had played. And yeah, I mean, are you going to tell me that A&M, Ohio State, two teams that have one loss between them, that have played some of the best football in the country, respectively, over the past month plus, wouldn't draw a huge number ratings-wise that wouldn't make up for the $4 million shortfall that A&M lost because of this game being canceled? I mean, this would probably take the tone of an NFL, divisional playoff round matchup. This is serious business. This would really draw a lot of eyes. It would make a whole lot of impact for both teams, not just on television, but in social media. And you're telling me that recruits wouldn't eat this up, especially with, 5 days until the early signing period? There are so many advantages here for both teams that it almost makes too much sense for this game to happen.
And it's just like in football, when you hit a guy in the worst place, the hands, when you throw the ball to him and he drops it. So, I'm kind of expecting that same type of output there. And we'll get into a little bit of maybe what we would expect to see out of a game like this. But, I want to bring up the point that a lot of people are saying that this type of game, why should Texas A&M and Ohio State subject themselves essentially to a play-in game into the college football playoff? And I'll put it to you, but I want to put my 2 cents on there. I'm saying one of these two teams for sure probably is not making the college football playoff field regardless. So if your back's against the wall a little bit and this is your best chance of getting into the field, and I think that's probably a little bit from where we stand based on the rankings, and we're going to see the rankings updated this evening here on Tuesday evening on ESPN, and I really don't expect to see any changes in terms of 1 through 6. Why not put yourself in a situation to change the narrative a little bit?
Yeah, and that makes that's especially the case for A&M, because right now the Aggies are in the untenable or the unfortunate position of needing help. Basically, they need either Ohio State to lose, or they need Notre Dame to beat Clemson a second time, or they need Clemson to absolutely clean the clock of Notre Dame. Otherwise, they're not getting in. The SEC championship game itself is almost irrelevant. Even if Florida wins, A&M's not getting in, because then Florida will probably jump A&M and be the fourth team. If Alabama wins, then you're at the status quo. A&M had already beaten Florida. Florida has 2 losses. Who cares? Now, if you go and you play an Ohio State and, by some chance you win, then you're in. If you don't win, then you're going to the Cotton Bowl anyway, because that would be where they would end up. They're still going to be a 8-2 team. That's not too shabby, especially in this year when it would have been an all SEC schedule and the best team in the Big Ten. So from A&M's perspective, what do you got to lose? Now, on the other hand, for Ohio State, you have the opportunity to lose that number 4 spot. So I can see there being a little more reticence on the Ohio State side than from A&M. But, just from a pure college football fan standpoint, I can't imagine a better opportunity for the sport to basically give a Christmas present to its fan base.
And we'll talk a little bit more about what this game could look like on the other side of this quick 30-second break. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined by Mark Passwaters of AggieYell.com, and we are talking about what a hypothetical Ohio State Texas A&M game could look like. people have already kind of grasped onto this idea on social, and one odds maker said Ohio State would be an 11.5-point favorite. And I'm assuming that's on a neutral field somewhere. I don't know where you play this. Indianapolis, I don't know, Kansas City. I think they would want to put it somewhere where weather may not be a factor, but it's not like we're dealing with a foot of snow anywhere yet, except for maybe in the mountains somewhere. And I don't see them playing this game in Boise, Idaho. So, your thoughts on hearing that type of number, especially knowing that Ohio State played last week down 3 offensive linemen, 23 players were unavailable for the game. One of their starting linebackers was out, and, this is far from a perfect Ohio State team at this point. While they're unbeaten, they certainly have some issues that probably still has them about half a rung below the Clemsons and Alabamas of the world.
Well, I thought it was a little high, but I'm probably got a skewed opinion as well. I've been watching A&M all year, haven't seen as much of Ohio State, obviously. But I thought 11.5 was a bit much. I think that this could be a really interesting and kind of really close game just because of the style of play of both teams.
When you look at Ohio State, and I haven't watched a lot of A&M, and for full disclosure, my wife went to Ole Miss, and I was really excited to see an Ole Miss A&M game, and I was going to watch it even if it was on the DVR because I thought that was going to be an interesting contrast of two different styles. You have Ole Miss, who can play a lot of offense and not a shred of defense, and then you have A&M, who, from my standpoint, plays tremendous defense and maybe has an inconsistent offense. Am I far off in saying that before I go further down the road on my question?
Well, the offense has been pretty good when it's not raining, at least the last 6 weeks or so. But no, I think that you're right. Basically, this team is built like a classic SEC team. A lot of people, I think, on the national level still have this idea that A&M is going to come out and run and gun and be up-tempo, kind of like the Johnny Manziel era, and they're not. They're the exact opposite of that. This is a team that takes the air out of the football. They run a lot. They run the ball well. They got a good offensive line, and they stop the run. The X factor really for them is quarterback Kellen Mond. When Mond is on, they move the ball, they score points. When he struggles, then, plainly, they don't. So I think that he would be the major factor in the game. A&M has some weapons. The running back stable is excellent. Isaiah Spiller being the top guy, but you've got Devin Chain, who is a true freshman that's really come on. And Anaya Smith is a guy that can beat you with his legs or as a receiver. And then Jalen Weidemeyer is one of the best tight ends in the country. They're short at wideout, so that kind of limits what they can do with the deep ball. But the offensive line is one of the country's best, and that's basically the way they made their money this year, is they go out and basically beat on you physically. And that would be kind of interesting to see with what Ohio State does.
And you talk about beat on you physically, and it just sounds like that A&M plays, in terms of the physicality, a Big Ten style of football. And, we can go back to some of the old misconceptions that the Big Ten's slow. Well, Ohio State's proven that's not the case. Other people will sit there and say that the Big Ten may be the toughest league in terms of physicality. I don't know if that's always going to be the case, when you look at each team or whatnot. But when you look at Ohio State this year, Ohio State's 6th in the nation in rushing defense, only allowing 95 yards a game. But I also sit there and circle back and say, who has Ohio State faced in terms of a great runner? And there really hasn't been that great runner on their schedule. I mean, Minnesota has a great back. They didn't play the Gophers this year, so it certainly creates some issues there. The way that I think you get at Ohio State is that deep ball. You do try to take the top off the defense. You do sit there and try to do some of these 50-50 balls and go out and get them. And if you go back and you look at Ohio State versus Penn State, Jahan Dotson had a couple of tremendous catches over a projected first-round cornerback in Sean Wade because, athletes just go out and make plays sometimes. If you look at some of Ohio State's other shortcomings, I think it was just instances where people just weren't dialed in and made some bad decisions. But do you think that Kellen Mond and the A&M defense would be able to have enough of a passing attack, especially a vertical passing attack? Because I don't know if a dink and dunk system is going to work to get into potentially a shootout with Ohio State, because I wouldn't know what an over-under would be on this, but I'm just telling you, I could see some fireworks in this game.
Well, I think that it's interesting because if Caleb Chapman hadn't gotten hurt against Florida, yeah, they'd have a deep game because he really came into his own in that game. They were beating Florida deep routinely. Since then, they really haven't tried it a whole lot. They haven't needed to. Their identity has really become, we're going to take the air out of the football. We're going to play real physical. We're going to run the ball. We're going to use the short to medium passing game. I mean, Mond's best pass is probably 12 to 15 yards over the middle. He's always had that in his repertoire going back to when he was an underclassman. But the deep game, I don't know. I think that they would have to basically take it right at Ohio State and try to control time of possession, do it the old-fashioned way, because I don't think the this team is built for the quick strike, so they would have to use other methods, and maybe that would be to their disadvantage. But, they have moved the ball on everybody. They put up 450 yards on Alabama. They put up 543 yards on Florida. They put up 510 yards, including 313 on the ground, last weekend against Auburn. And those are the three, quote-unquote, ranked teams that they played this year. So they're not a bad offense, but they do have that limitation where they're not going to sit there and go bombs away on you. That's just not their identity. And I can't see it changing regardless of who they play, even though that might put them at a bit of a disadvantage against Ohio State.
And then there's flip sides of the ball. And, everybody wants to talk about Justin Fields, but we're talking about a team in A&M that has faced Mac Jones, that has faced Kyle Trask. So it's not a case of where the Aggies are going in blind in terms of playing a crazy, super uber talented type of quarterback. But, Ohio State is 26th in passing, 7th in rushing, real balanced attack. The goal is to be kind of that 250 team that was kind of started under Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day has certainly picked up that baton. They're 281, 251, so even better than that. How would you see A&M potentially trying to attack an Ohio State offense that is 4th in the nation in scoring offense, scoring nearly 47 points a game?
Well, they would probably go with the first thing that they've done against most opponents, and that would be take away the run. You talk about Ohio State's got a great run defense. A&M's is right there, too. They're 9th in the country against the run. So they have played tough opponents, and their running games that have shut them down. That's pretty much universal. Now, that will put the pressure on Justin Fields, and, such a problem to have. But the best thing that A&M has done, and they have done it very well for the past month or so, is they have made opponents one-dimensional. They have taken away the run. Arkansas had some success in running the ball against them 4 or 5 games ago, and the interesting thing with that was that literally Arkansas took their bye week before A&M and completely revamped their offense. So A&M's film study didn't do much for them. But by the middle of the third quarter, that game was over anyway. A&M had just taken it to them. So there is a mindset with the Aggies that you go out there, you stop the running game of the opponent, and then you see what you can do against the pass. The biggest thing I think for the Aggies would be making sure that Fields doesn't get out of the pocket and do damage with his legs, because he's so good at that. Just keeping drives alive. And that's the difference between him and Trask and Jones. Those guys are pocket quarterbacks. You know they're going to do damage, but you know that they're going to have to do it with their arm. Fields can do it with his legs as well. So that would make it a little bit different. So, he would be their nightmare opponent in the respect that he can beat them with his legs. That's one thing that they've kind of had a problem with. But overall, they played really solid defense, better than I was expecting, especially in the secondary. After getting gutted by Jones and Trask in weeks 2 and 3, they're still the second best secondary in the SEC. So that's saying something. But the first thing, got to take care of the run, and then if you can find a way to pressure Fields, you do it. But first things first, run the ball, stop the run. That is their identity.
And you've kind of touched upon some of these things here as we're on the BIA podcast talking about a hypothetical Ohio State Texas A&M game. What do you think would be the biggest key for A&M in this hypothetical game to pull off the upset? And again, whether or not, a fictitious line out there of 11.5, let's say that it got bet down. If this game were put on paper and it got bet down to 6, I mean, I still don't see a situation of where Ohio State goes into this game as the dog, but I think it's probably, I think it's south of 11.5 myself too. I think that's a little high, but what would be the biggest key overall for A&M to win this kind of game?
Controlling time of possession. I think that if you do that, that means you're moving the ball the way you want to move the ball. And that means they're running, they're controlling the line of scrimmage behind that big offensive line. I don't think it would be too much of a boast to say that this bunch would be the best offensive line Ohio State would see this year. And that includes whether they get into the playoff or not. This bunch is good, way beyond any expectations we had at the start of the year. So if they're controlling the clock the way that they would like to, that means they're having long drives, they're picking up yardage, they're converting on third downs, which they've done well. But more importantly, they're keeping Ohio State off the field. If they can do that, and Spiller gets going, and A-Chain gets moving, and they find Weidemeyer and Anaya Smith in the passing game, then it's a ballgame. But if you're sitting there and you're going 3 and out early or with some semblance of consistency, then you're giving too many opportunities to that offense. And, I haven't seen a ton of Ohio State, but I've seen enough to know that they're explosive, and you don't want to be in a position where you're trying to shoot it out with them.
And that was going to be my point right there about if this game ever came to pass, that Ohio State would want to turn it into a bit of a track meet, because Ohio State certainly scoring close to 47 points a game or whatnot, granted, not necessarily going against the caliber of opponent that A&M is week in and week out, especially with the Big Ten being down. I think Ohio State would want it to be a place where it's like, all right, let's see if you can score 40. If you can score 40, then we're going to have ourselves a game. But if you can't score 40, it's just going to be a matter of writing it out. So, I really think it would be a tremendous game. I put the chances of this game happening about 1 in a million. But it's still something fun to talk about. And even as we're sitting here recording this, I'm still getting bombarded on social with people sending messages about what are the chances of an A&M game happening? What are the chances of an A&M game happening? And ultimately, I kind of want to end on the point of, I truly believe, and I assume that anybody who's around the sport, such as yourself, I think that scheduling games out 6, 8, 10, 12 years in advance is to the detriment of this sport. And I know at this point of the year, you're supposed to be playing conference games and whatever, and you really shouldn't have a flex option or whatnot. But there certainly needs to be some sort of situation to where when you're booking somebody 8 years in advance and they fall off the table, in terms of what it is they're able to do, that you should be able to make some changes. Because if not, it's a lot of it's just akin to you playing 2 directional schools, 1 marquee opponent, and then your league schedule. And if your league's down, you're in deep waters at that point.
I agree. I think that this 8, 10, 12-year thing is ridiculous. And, looking at the current environment with the economy and what COVID has done, you sure that you're even going to have an opponent? Are they going to, some of these lesser programs, are they going to be able to survive this thing? And I think that, when you sit there and you look at the opportunities that are missed, like the opportunity for A&M to play Ohio State this weekend, because, neither conference will allow it. And you take a look at some of the other great games that people can think of that aren't happening because these programs are booked with, silly games 8, 9, 10 years down the road. Who does that benefit? I mean, outside of some guy that's printing a schedule, who does that really help? You don't know if they're going to be good or they're going to be bad. If you're going to need that big game somewhere like this game would be to push you to the next level, I mean, it's just, going into NCAA 14 and changing the schedule would make more sense than going out there and booking somebody for 2028.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And, I think that, I don't want to give MLB's Rob Manfred any kudos because I think he's a horrible commissioner. But, I think that some of the changes that they made on the fly in terms of this 2020 season, worked out. And, I don't want to get into a grand debate about the universal DH or anything along those lines, or maybe a playoff field that was expanded too much too wide, but it does show that even the grand old game can make some changes. But yet college football, especially within some of its conferences, is just so stubborn and slow to move. And anybody who's a regular listening to this show knows that I believe we're not that far off from seeing a split off in terms of maybe 1A fracturing a little bit more and your top teams kind of moving off, and maybe something like this will be yet another catalyst toward that happening as grant of rights deals and broadcast deals start to come to an end.
Well, I would be very happy to see the Power 5 conferences go and do their own thing. But I would be even happier if there was an opportunity for individual athletic departments, administrations, universities, however you want to look at it, to have a chance to control their own destiny. And some of them have tied themselves up, and it's their own fault, and that's too bad. But on the other hand, here's Texas A&M, and they have a chance to make the SEC a whole lot of money by making the college football playoff. And they're getting absolutely no help whatsoever from Birmingham, and that's extraordinarily frustrating. And you wish they had the opportunity to say, the heck with you guys, I'll do it myself, and go out, find an opponent, and play. But as it stands right now, and, I got a text while we were talking that, there is a small chance that A&M may play Tennessee this weekend and Ole Miss the 19th, but I'm not putting much faith in that. But right now, you're sitting there with the number 5 team. They're going to be idle because the conference won't do anything to help them. I haven't had much good to say about the Big Ten this year, but at least they're going to get Ohio State on the field. That's one better than what the SEC is going to do for the Aggies.
Well, we shall see what happens with the Big Ten. I'm going to end with one final thought, and then I'll throw it back to you one more time for any last thoughts you might have. If this game happens, promise me one thing: no SEC officiating crew, or at least no SEC replay crew, because Ohio State fans still salty about the Fiesta Bowl and a play that went to SEC replay bunker and was completely misinterpreted and cost Ohio State dearly. So can we agree no SEC officials for this game? It doesn't have to be Big Ten. They can go third party, but I don't think any Ohio State fan wants to see an SEC official anytime soon.
Well, I can understand that, but in turn, I don't want any Big 12 officials. They're terrible. And, we went through 2 decades of them screwing A&M, so that would be where I draw the line. I don't want to see anything that has to do with the Big 12. So I guess that means we're looking at the ACC, and so be it. That's fine with me. But, I just wish that they could somehow, some way, get this thing on the field, because I think it would be absolutely tremendous for the fans, and that's probably the reason it'll never happen.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank Mark Passwaters for joining us from AggieYell.com. Do you have any final thoughts, anything, as we kind of threw this show together? Again, anybody who's listening, any of these naysayers saying, oh, these two guys, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, this game's never going to happen. Yes, we give you that. We understand. But we're dealing with 2 blue blood programs right now who at this moment in time don't have an opponent for this week, and both are trying to improve their standings in terms of college football playoff. Any final thoughts on any of this?
I just wish that COVID had never come along. A&M had played their regular schedule, because they'd probably be right back where they are right now. In the discussion, in the hunt for the college football playoff, and you and I could actually legitimately be talking about A&M playing Ohio State in the playoffs, as opposed to coming up with a hypothetical, that would benefit both sides. And I think that just stinks. It's just another lousy part of 2020. But, hey, it's just fun to discuss these things with you, because that means both teams are doing well, and you can't ask for much more than that.
Absolutely. And it's the hypotheticals and it's the conversations that keep all this fun. We only get to see, at best 15 games from a team a year. If they, have a 12-game conference schedule, a league championship game, and play 2 in the college football playoff. We have a lot of other weekends, a lot of other days of the 365 that we've got to fill. And I really appreciate you, taking part on this and going through this hypothetical with us. And, we'll see what happens. And, since it probably won't be Ohio State, we'll see what A&M gets, and we'll see what Ohio State gets. And then come December 20th, we'll see which 4 teams get the golden tickets.
Yeah. And, I wish everybody out there a very happy holidays and Merry Christmas and all that jazz. And may 2021 be a better year for all.
Absolutely. And on that note, we're going to call this show a wrap. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and I want to thank you for listening to the BIA podcast. We try to get here when news breaks, and there certainly is enough news breaking today. I'd expect to hear from me a little bit more this week, as Ohio State's still trying to find out who its opponent's going to be. And I promise you, if it's Texas A&M, we're going to dial Mark right back up again, figure this out. I may even volunteer to play the game in Dallas just so I can go back home and go visit a lot of friends. But, for now, we're going to call it a show. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you very, very soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.